She handed him a phone and whispered, "This isn't yours." Seconds later, the billionaire CEO pressed play, and his entire world shattered. James Colton was 30 years old and already one of the most powerful CEOs on the West Coast. With sharp brown eyes, carefully styled dark brown hair, and a reputation built on brilliance and relentless discipline, he was the face of a corporate empire that had reshaped the tech industry. His presence turned heads in every room, commanding, elegant, the kind of man people didn't forget. But all the tailored suits, spotless awards, and magazine covers meant little to him after the day he walked into that orphanage 2 years ago and met the girl who would change everything. Her name was Lily. She was 6 at the time, small for her age, with long, slightly tangled brown hair and eyes so dark and watchful they seemed older than her years. While other children played or shyly approached the visitors, Lily sat quietly in a corner with a book she couldn't read, her tiny fingers tracing the pages. James noticed her immediately, drawn to her silence like it was a language he somehow understood. He had come on what was supposed to be a routine philanthropic visit, organized by his public relations team. Appear, donate, pose for photos, leave. But when he knelt down in front of Lily and asked her name, something in her face shifted. A flicker, a quiet recognition, as if she had been waiting for him. He didn't leave after the photos. He stayed. He returned the next day, and the day after that. The process to adopt her was complex. There were legal hurdles, media questions, and people in his inner circle who whispered, "Are you sure this is good for your image?" But James had never cared less about his image. What mattered was that Lily needed someone, and if he was honest, so did he. She moved into his modern, glass-walled penthouse like a ghost at first. She barely spoke, never cried, and avoided physical contact. But she watched everything. Every night she curled up with a book, still not reading, just holding it. James, who had built companies from scratch, found himself studying parenting blogs at 2 a.m., trying to figure out how to reach a child who had known too much pain too soon. Gradually, tiny changes happened. She began to sleep with her door cracked open. She let him brush her hair after bath time. She laughed once at a cartoon about penguins and then quickly covered her mouth as if it were a mistake. But James saw it. He remembered every small breakthrough like milestones. The first time she hugged him goodnight, the first time she called him dad, the first time she asked if she could sit beside him during a meeting. He didn't care how unusual it was to have a child in a corporate boardroom. He bought a smaller desk and set it up next to his. While he spoke to investors, Lily colored or quietly built puzzles. Employees adjusted quickly. Soon, Bring Your Child to Work Day felt permanent and no one questioned it. Then a year later came Amelia. He met her at a business gala in New York. She was radiant, everything people expected a billionaire's fiancée to be. Graceful, articulate, with glacier blue eyes and a laugh like polished silver. She was also sharp, ambitious, and understood the high-stakes world James lived in. Their relationship bloomed quickly, to the approval of his peers and media alike. But Lily didn't smile around Amelia. She remained polite but distant. When James asked what she thought of Amelia, she would shrug or change the subject. He assumed it was adjustment anxiety, a natural part of opening their world to someone new. Amelia tried to connect. She gave Lily books, toys, even baked cookies. But the connection never came. Lily was always watching. By the time James proposed, Lily had grown quieter. He chalked it up to stress, fear of change. He promised her nothing would ever replace her, that they were a family. She nodded, but her eyes didn't believe him. Looking back, he would remember those last few days before everything changed with haunting clarity. The way Lily had hesitated every time Amelia entered the room, the way she had started sleeping with her door fully closed again, the way she clutched her small backpack wherever they went. And he would remember that evening in the restaurant. The perfect dinner, the perfect setting, and his daughter reaching into that very backpack, pulling out a phone that wasn't hers, and quietly saying the words that would change everything. "This phone's not yours." It was the moment his life split cleanly in two, the time before and the time after the truth. The restaurant was one of James Colton's favorites, an elegant yet understated place tucked in the quieter hills above Los Angeles. It was a spot he often retreated to when he needed calm, away from the intensity of the boardroom and headlines. Tonight, however, it wasn't a retreat. It was a celebration. His engagement to Amelia had made national news just days earlier, and the evening was intended to be a quiet moment for the three of them, James, Amelia, and Lily, to begin their new life together as a family. The staff welcomed them like royalty. A private table by the window had been reserved, with a view of the city lights blinking below like stars scattered across a black canvas. Candles flickered between the fine china. James sat at the head of the table, Lily to his right, Amelia to his left. He had even taken the extra step of asking the chef to prepare a custom dish Lily would like. Pasta with no green things, extra cheese. Lily had barely touched her food. James noticed immediately. She sat still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her dark brown eyes scanning the room in quick, precise glances. She wasn't pouting or throwing a fit. Lily didn't do tantrums. But something about her posture, about the intense concentration in her face, made his stomach tighten. Amelia was talking, trying to fill the silence. She was good at that. She spoke about a recent charity event, about future plans, about colors for a possible wedding. She even leaned over and smiled at Lily, making a joke about how Lily could wear matching shoes with her dress. Lily smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then she dropped her gaze back to her lap. James was about to ask what was wrong when Lily did something completely unexpected. Without a word, she reached into her small backpack, pink with a faded unicorn keychain, and pulled out a phone. It wasn't her phone. It was sleek, black, unfamiliar. She placed it on the white tablecloth between the three of them, then looked up at Amelia with a gaze so calm and serious it could have frozen time. "This phone's not yours," she said, her voice clear and eerily steady. Amelia blinked. "What?" James straightened in his seat. "Lily, what is that?" "I found it in her bag," Lily said, still not raising her voice. "Yesterday in the hallway. I turned it on. I didn't mean to, but it wasn't locked. I listened." Amelia reached out quickly, her voice sharp. "Lily, give me that." But James was faster. He took the phone before Amelia could touch it and stared down at it, confusion knitting his brows. He had a dozen phones, business, personal, encrypted, but this wasn't one of his. It wasn't Lily's, and it definitely wasn't supposed to be at this table. "Lily, what did you listen to?" he asked. She glanced at him, then at Amelia. Her voice trembled just slightly now. "There are voice recordings," she said. "Messages. Her voice. She talks to someone about your deals, about private files, about sending things to someone named Carter." She looked down. "She's selling your secrets." A horrible silence settled over the table. James's hands moved almost on instinct, unlocking the phone. He opened the voice memo app. The latest file was from 2 nights ago. He tapped it. Amelia's voice filled the air. "He's signing the contract on Friday. If you make an offer 3% lower, he'll switch. Just make sure it's anonymous. He can't know it came from us." James froze. Every sound in the restaurant faded. The clinking of cutlery, the gentle music, the murmured conversations. Gone. He looked at Amelia. She had gone pale. Her mouth was slightly open, eyes darting between James and the phone. "That's not what it sounds like," she started. "James, I can explain." "To who?" he said, his voice low. "To my competitors, to the press, or to my daughter?" His tone was sharp, dangerous. A man used to power, but now teetering on the edge of betrayal. Lily watched them both, her small fingers curled tightly in her lap. Amelia leaned forward, lowering her voice like it might soften the blow. "I only did it because I thought, you're always so busy, so cold. You don't let anyone in. I thought if I could help, if I could give someone else leverage, we could build something new." "You lied to me," James said, his hands trembling now, not with fear, but fury. "You lied to Lily. You lied to the man who trusted you enough to let you near his daughter." She stood up, suddenly desperate. "I can fix this. I'll delete everything. It's not too late." James stood too. "Oh, it's too late." He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The authority in his voice silenced the room more effectively than any outburst could. Other diners turned to look. Staff hesitated near the kitchen. He looked down at Lily. "Come on," he said gently. She slid out of her chair, gripping his hand as he led her out of the restaurant. He didn't look back at Amelia. Not once. As the door closed behind them and they stepped into the cool night air, James took a deep breath for the first time in hours. Lily looked up at him, uncertain. Did I do the wrong thing? She asked softly. He knelt down, placing both hands on her small shoulders. You did exactly the right thing, he said. You told the truth. You protected our family. And I will never forget that. He hugged her tightly, and for the first time in a long while, she hugged him back. Fully, without hesitation. In that moment, James didn't care about the headlines, or the fallout, or the betrayal. He cared about the girl who just saved his life. James didn't sleep that night. The moment he and Lily returned home from the restaurant, everything began to unravel in his mind. He placed the mysterious phone on the marble kitchen counter as if it were a loaded weapon. It sat there silently, but to him it buzzed with 1,000 unanswered questions, 100 broken trusts, and one devastating truth. Amelia, the woman he had intended to marry, the woman he had let into his home, into his life, into Lily's life, had betrayed them. Lily had gone to her room quietly as always. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. She didn't brush her teeth with her usual sleepy stubbornness. She simply changed into her pajamas, curled up in bed, and faced the wall. James peeked in an hour later to find her still awake, wide-eyed, staring into the dark. He didn't say anything. He just knelt by her bed and stroked her hair in silence until she finally whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." That broke him more than anything else that had happened. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he whispered back. "You were brave. You told the truth. You protected me." She turned toward him slowly. "I just didn't want her to hurt you." He took her hand in both of his. "She didn't. Not really. Because I still have you." He waited until she fell asleep before going back downstairs, pouring himself a glass of scotch he didn't really want, and sitting on the edge of the leather couch as if the weight of everything might crush him if he sank too deep. He reopened the voice recordings, listened to them again and again. Amelia's voice was clear, deliberate. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Names of investors, meeting times, password hints. She hadn't just crossed a line. She had calculated her betrayal with precision. Every word was proof. He copied all the audio files onto a secure drive. Then he opened the text messages. There were threads with someone saved only as C. One message chilled him. "He trusts me completely. He even let me watch Lily while he was away. I'm telling you, he'll never see it coming." He read it 3 times before setting the phone down and walking into his office. He called Jonathan Haynes, his most trusted lawyer, and the only man he trusted implicitly with sensitive information. Jonathan answered, groggy but alert, as soon as he heard James's voice. "I need you at my house by 6, James said. "We have a situation." By dawn, Jonathan was there, and James laid everything out, recordings, messages, dates, his suspicions. Jonathan listened in silence, only breaking it to say, "We'll need to start a full internal review immediately. If even a fraction of this data was leaked, it's not just a PR disaster. It's legal exposure, criminal liability, investor fallout." But he looked at James. "We can get ahead of it." James nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't care how it affects the company. I care that she sat at the same table as my daughter and looked her in the eye while selling us out." That afternoon, they brought in cybersecurity experts to check for any software breaches on James's personal and business devices. They scanned everything, servers, home Wi-Fi, even Amelia's tablet, which James had discreetly taken before she could return for it. Traces of data transfer were found, nothing massive yet, but enough to confirm this wasn't just personal betrayal. This was espionage. That evening, the board was informed. Quietly, carefully, trusted members only. One of them, an older woman named Karen Blake, who had worked with James since the early days, placed a hand on his arm after the meeting. "You've built this company from nothing," she said, "and you've protected it with everything you had. But this isn't just about the company anymore. You've got a little girl to protect too. Don't forget that." "I haven't," James replied. "She's the reason I'm still standing." At home, Lily sensed the tension, but didn't ask many questions. Instead, she stayed close to James, often sitting in the corner of his office with a sketch pad, or quietly watching him as he took call after call. He made sure to take breaks just to sit beside her, ask about her drawings, and remind her that everything was okay. One evening, she handed him a picture she had drawn. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall with brown hair, the other small with big brown eyes. Above their heads, a heart and the words, "Me pull dad, Andre's safe." James didn't cry often. He had trained himself not to, but this time he did. Not from weakness, from gratitude, from the terrifying realization that a child had done what armies of lawyers and tech experts hadn't. She had seen what others missed. She had trusted her instincts. She had spoken up. And now, because of her, the truth was out. Because of her, the damage could be contained. Because of her, he hadn't made the worst mistake of his life. In that moment, sitting beside Lily as she leaned her head against his shoulder, James vowed he would never again ignore her intuition, her voice, her courage. She wasn't just his daughter. She was his shield, his anchor, his reason to fight. The days that followed were unlike anything James Colton had ever experienced, not even during his most volatile corporate battles, financial takeovers, or late-night negotiations that had once defined his empire. This was personal. It wasn't about profits or competitors. It was about betrayal, about trust, about the little girl now curled up in a blanket fort in his office as he tried to piece his world back together. He had Amelia's secret phone locked in a biometric case. Every piece of data from it had been copied, stored, and transferred to multiple secure locations. Jonathan's legal team had already begun working with federal investigators. Charges were being drafted, privacy violations documented, and subpoenas prepared for the shadowy C on the other end of the messages. But through it all, James kept circling back to one thing. Lily. She was quiet, but not like before. Not withdrawn. Not uncertain. Her silence had weight now. It was the silence of someone watching everything, someone waiting to see if the people around her could be trusted again. She never asked what happened to Amelia. She never once said, "I told you so." Instead, she followed James from room to room like a small, serious shadow. Every night they had dinner together, just the two of them. No nannies, no assistants. Just Lily with her noodles and James with a glass of water and takeout he barely touched. They watched movies, though she never seemed entirely focused, and every night, without fail, Lily left her bedroom door open. One evening, a week after the confrontation, James stood in the hallway outside her room, holding a worn children's book in his hands. It was the one she had always clutched when she first moved in, the one she never let anyone read to her. He knocked gently on the doorframe. She looked up from her bed, blinking. "Can I read to you tonight?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He sat on the edge of her bed and opened the book. His voice was slow at first, a little rough. He hadn't read aloud in years, but by the second page he found a rhythm. Lily didn't say a word, but halfway through she rested her head against his arm, and by the final sentence, she was asleep. James closed the book carefully and sat there for a long time, watching her breathe. She had risked everything for him, her peace, her courage, her place in his life, and now it was his turn to give that back. The next morning, James called a staff meeting. Not in the boardroom, but in the family kitchen. It wasn't his typical move, but nothing about his life was typical anymore. Lily was there, sitting at the counter with a bowl of cereal. The kitchen staff, household managers, private security, every trusted employee was present. "I want to make something clear," James began, looking each of them in the eye. "This house, this family, it runs on trust, and someone broke that." He paused, letting the silence sink in. "But someone else protected it. Lily saved us. And from now on, if she tells you something's wrong, you listen." The adults nodded solemnly. Lily looked down at her cereal. James turned to her and said, "That goes for me too." Later that day, he found her in his office, sketching in her notebook. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She held it up. It was a castle, huge, towering with high walls and a tiny figure standing guard at the gate. "Is that me?" he asked. "No," she said. "That's me. I'm the guard. You're the king inside." He smiled, but it was bittersweet. "Do you want to be inside too?" Lily thought for a moment. "Not yet. I need to make sure it's safe first." That answer stayed with him. That evening, James did something he hadn't done in years. He cooked dinner. Really cooked. Not just reheated or ordered in. He made pasta from scratch, with tomato sauce and garlic bread and a salad he knew Lily wouldn't eat, but put there anyway, just for tradition. She watched him move around the kitchen like it was something new, something ordinary, something human. "Where'd you learn to do that?" she asked. "My mom," he said, "before she died." Lily went quiet, then asked, "Were you little like me?" He nodded. Smaller, probably. She smiled. Then maybe I'll grow tall too? He laughed. You're already stronger than me. That night, after the dishes were cleared and Lily was asleep, James stood in the doorway of her room and looked at her one more time. Really looked. She wasn't just his daughter legally. She wasn't just a child he rescued from a system or a name on paper. She was his partner in surviving, his compass in the storm, the proof that even the coldest lives could still be warmed. Downstairs, his phone buzzed. Jonathan. She's been arrested, the message read, trying to flee through a private jet. We got her. James turned off the screen and looked out the window at the stars. Justice would come. But what mattered most was already here, asleep, safe in the room above him. And she would never have to doubt him again. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the tall glass windows of the Colton estate, casting long, golden beams across the marble floors. It was the first truly quiet morning in weeks. The kind of silence that didn't come from tension or pain, but from peace, from a breath finally being exhaled after being held far too long. James stood in the kitchen wearing a worn black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, an outfit his assistants would never have believed he even owned. His bare feet moved lightly across the cool floor as he prepared breakfast for two. Lily was still upstairs, likely reading in bed or feeding the stray cat that had started showing up on the garden steps. He had seen her sneaking at pieces of turkey before, pretending she wasn't. He didn't call her down right away. He let her come on her own time now. Routines had shifted in their household. Structure still existed. He believed children needed that, but now it was gentler. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about healing. After Amelia's arrest, the media frenzy exploded. Headlines buzzed with betrayal, scandal, and speculation. News outlets scrambled to dissect the story. Billionaire fiancé behind corporate espionage. James Colton betrayed by inner circle. The child who saved a fortune. The latter was the only one James ever smiled at. He didn't speak to the press. He didn't give statements. He let his legal team handle the narrative. He had more important things to do, like make pancakes with banana slices shaped like stars, the way Lily liked them. By the time she came downstairs in her fuzzy socks and oversized hoodie that once belonged to him, James had already set the table. Morning, sleepyhead, he said with a soft smile. Lily rubbed her eyes. Smells good. You want to eat here or in the garden? She considered. Garden. Good choice. They took their plates outside. The garden was still damp with morning dew, and the air smelled of jasmine and the faint, earthy scent of soil. They sat on a wooden bench beneath a pergola that James had once had built for photo shoots, but now used as a real-life breakfast nook. For a while they ate in silence. The soft sounds of the city waking up echoed faintly in the background. Then Lily spoke, her voice careful. Will she go to jail? James nodded slowly, placing his fork down. Yes, there's evidence. More than enough. She did something very wrong, and there are consequences. Lily looked down at her plate, pushing a star-shaped banana slice in circles. I didn't like her, but I didn't want her to be gone forever. James's heart ached a little at that. Lily had already lost too many people, too much change. He wanted her to feel safe, not hardened. She made her own choices, he said gently, but you made the brave one. And because of that, we're safe. You're safe. She didn't reply, but she leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and they sat there until the plates were cold and forgotten. Later that day, James met with Jonathan in the study. Papers were signed, statements drafted, all corporate links to Amelia were formally severed. Lawsuits were in motion. Private security had doubled for Lily's protection, not out of paranoia, but caution. James no longer trusted as easily. But there was something else, something more personal he wanted to handle. He logged into his private server and began writing a letter, not for public eyes, but for Lily. A letter she could read when she was older, one that explained everything, the betrayal, the risk, the way she had saved them both. He didn't want her to ever wonder if what she'd done was right. He wanted her to have the truth, not the filtered version. When he finished, he printed it and sealed it in an envelope marked with her name. That evening, James made another decision, one he hadn't discussed with anyone yet. He called a real estate agent and began the process of purchasing a home outside the city. A smaller place, a quieter place, one where he and Lily could build something from the ground up, not made of glass and steel, but wood and warmth. He didn't want their home to feel like a fortress anymore. He wanted it to feel like family. That night, Lily knocked on his door holding her sketch pad. "Can I show you something?" she asked. "Always," he replied. She sat beside him on the couch and flipped to a page. It was a drawing of three figures: a tall man, a girl, and a woman. The woman had no face, just an empty outline. James swallowed. "Who's that?" Lily shrugged. "I don't know yet, but when we meet her, I'll draw her face." James nodded slowly. "And until then," Lily smiled, "we're enough." He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head, and in that moment, James knew. He didn't need headlines, deals, or power. He didn't need another love story to feel complete. He had Lily. He had enough. Autumn had arrived like a whisper, slipping quietly into the city with crisp air, gold-dusted leaves, and softer light through the windows. For most of the world, life moved forward with noise and momentum. Markets shifted, new technologies launched, headlines churned. But for James and Lily, the pace had changed entirely. They no longer rushed. It had been nearly 3 months since Amelia's arrest. Since the night Lily had revealed the truth, shattered a carefully constructed illusion, and rebuilt the foundation of their family in a single breath. In that time, James had turned down every interview, every television special, every lucrative book deal that offered to tell his side. He had nothing to prove, nothing to perform. His priority had narrowed to one thing only: being a father. Their days were quieter now. Mornings started with pancakes or oatmeal, then long walks in the nearby park where Lily liked to feed the birds and photograph trees with a child-sized camera James had bought her. Afternoons were filled with homeschooling sessions, which James now participated in personally, learning alongside her, sometimes just for the joy of sharing a discovery. Evenings were their sanctuary: hot chocolate, books read out loud, quiet music, and warm lamplight. But healing wasn't linear. There were still shadows. Some days Lily would grow silent, distant, distracted by a memory or a worry she couldn't name. Other days, James would find himself scrolling through old photos of Amelia, asking himself how he'd missed the signs. But those moments came less often now, like passing clouds instead of storms. One evening, James walked into the kitchen and found Lily kneeling on the tile floor beside a cardboard box, organizing colored pencils with the kind of concentration usually reserved for classified missions. "What's all this?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "It's for the foundation," she said simply. "The foundation?" She looked up. "The one we're going to start, to help kids, like me." James blinked. In the whirlwind of everything that had happened, in the silence that had followed the legal chaos, he had mentioned once, vaguely, that he wanted to do something meaningful with the resources he had, something lasting. Lily had clearly remembered. "You want to help other children?" he asked. She nodded. "Some kids don't have dads to listen when something's wrong, or someone to believe them." James's chest tightened. "I think they need someone to help them speak and be safe. And maybe," she paused, thinking carefully, "may even be happy." And so the idea was born. Over the next few weeks, they began sketching it out, not just on paper, but in purpose. They called it the Second Voice Foundation. It would start small: outreach programs for foster children, anonymous reporting systems in schools, art therapy workshops. James called in favors, hired the best legal minds and nonprofit strategists, but kept Lily at the heart of every decision. Her drawings became the branding. Her voice, soft, clear, brave, was the soul. People were skeptical at first. The media wanted a redemption arc. They wanted James to emerge victorious, polished, giving back because he had survived a scandal. But the truth was far less performative. He wasn't doing this to heal his image. He was doing it to heal himself and to honor the little girl who had taught him how. One Friday afternoon, they stood together inside a newly leased office in Pasadena. Modest, sunny, with shelves for books and walls ready to be filled with art. The staff was small: a retired school counselor named Eva, a tech-savvy intern named Cole, and a caseworker who had grown up in the foster system himself. James didn't care about resumes. He cared about heart. Lily walked into the center of the empty room and spun around slowly. "This is where people will come when they're scared?" "Yes," James said. "And we'll make it not scary? As much as we can." She nodded with the quiet authority of someone who'd lived through fear and come out the other side. That night, James found her on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Do you think they're watching?" she asked. "Who?" "The kids, the ones we'll help. The ones who don't know yet." He looked at the sky, at the vast, unknowable stretch above them. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe they're just waiting. Like you were." Lily leaned her head on his arm. "Then let's not make them wait too long." James didn't respond. He didn't need to. He simply wrapped his arm around her, held her close, and let the silence stretch. Not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that holds peace. They had been broken, betrayed, rewritten by trauma neither of them had asked for. But they had also built something new. Together, by the time winter arrived, the foundation had grown from an idea into something real, something alive. What began with a few desks and a handful of hopeful staff had evolved into a movement gaining quiet momentum across the city. Word spread quickly in the communities that needed it most. The Second Voice Foundation wasn't just another charity with a wealthy figurehead. It was personal, and people could feel that. James had become a very different man than the one who once built glass towers and held court in boardrooms. He still wore suits, but now they were wrinkled from chasing Lily through parks or sitting cross-legged on beanbags in classrooms, listening to children talk about the things no one else had asked them to say. He traded investment meetings for outreach visits, replaced quarterly earnings reports with therapy grant approvals. Lily, too, had grown, though not in height, which still frustrated her. But emotionally, she bloomed like spring after frost. She wasn't the quiet girl who clung to books as armor anymore. She was speaking on behalf of other kids, writing little speeches, sharing her story at schools and community centers with the softness and clarity of someone who had nothing to prove, only something to give. One rainy Thursday afternoon, James stood in the back of a public school gymnasium, watching Lily on stage. She wore a pale blue dress and sneakers with scuffed toes. Her hands shook slightly as she held the microphone. But her voice didn't. "Sometimes adults don't believe you," she said to the quiet crowd of kids seated on the floor. "Sometimes they say you're imagining things, or you're too young to know. But the truth is, when something feels wrong, it usually is. And if you feel scared, you're allowed to speak. You're allowed to ask for help. You're allowed to be heard." There was silence. Then applause. James blinked hard. He wasn't the kind of man who cried easily, but lately his eyes had become traitors. After the assembly, a girl no older than 7 approached Lily and hugged her without a word. Her mother stood behind her, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. James didn't need to ask why. He knew. Later that evening, after the event, James and Lily returned home. Their new house in the hills was smaller than the mansion they had left behind, but warmer in every way. It had real wood floors, worn from life and not from showrooms. The walls were full of pictures, photos of the two of them hiking, cooking, reading, painting. A life no longer curated, just lived. James had made dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, Lily's favorite. They sat at the kitchen table in pajamas, feet tucked up on the chairs, windows steamed from the warmth of the food. "I was nervous today," Lily admitted between bites. "You didn't seem it," James said. "I was. But then I looked at you." He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Me? You looked like you believed in me. And that made me believe in me too." James put his spoon down. "I always believe in you. Always." She smiled and kicked her feet lightly. "I know. That's why I'm not scared anymore." That night, as James stood brushing his teeth, he caught his reflection in the mirror and barely recognized himself. Not because he looked different, but because of the calm behind his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by failure or chased by ambition. He was present, he was fulfilled, and in the hallway, taped to the wall, was a new drawing Lily had made just that week. It showed 2 people holding flashlights in the dark, a tall man and a little girl. The caption beneath read, "We shine the light for others now." The next morning, James received a call. The State Board of Education wanted to partner with the Second Voice Foundation. They wanted to implement Lily's curriculum, her language, her stories, into public schools statewide. It was more than validation. It was legacy. James looked out the window at Lily, who was in the backyard, building a snowman that had fallen over 3 times already. She was giggling, her gloves soaked, her cheeks pink with cold. She had no idea what kind of ripple she had caused in the world, and that was exactly what made it so powerful. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because it was right. She had become a voice. And James? He had become the kind of man worthy of hearing it. Spring returned with a quiet grace, softening the sharp edges left by winter. The hills outside James and Lily's home glowed with wildflowers, and the days stretched longer, golden and fragrant. It was a time of blooming, both in the world outside their windows and within the lives they had rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal and silence. Lily was 9 now, just 9, but wise beyond the calendar. Her words carried weight, and her laughter, which used to be rare and cautious, had grown into something bright and free. She had started painting more, big, messy canvases in the garage that James had turned into a studio just for her. Every afternoon, she came home from school or a foundation event with paint on her fingers and joy in her voice. James had never been busier, and yet never more at peace. The Second Voice Foundation had gone national. Partnerships with schools, shelters, and law enforcement agencies continued to expand. They had even opened a children's wellness center in downtown Los Angeles, a space for therapy, creativity, and sanctuary. And though he still carried the title of CEO, he had stepped back from the tech empire that once defined him. His board ran it now. He ran toward what mattered. One Sunday morning, as the sun bathed their kitchen in soft light, Lily walked in holding a letter. James looked up from the newspaper. "What's that?" "It's for you," she said, placing it beside his coffee. He opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing, one of her best yet. It showed a tree with deep roots and a tall, strong trunk. In its branches were all kinds of birds, each different, colorful, unique. Some were flying, some resting, some still waiting to leave the nest. Below the tree were 2 figures, one tall with dark brown hair, one smaller, arms outstretched toward the sky. James felt his throat tighten. "Is this us?" he asked. Lily nodded. "You're the tree. I'm the one flying." He looked up at her. "You think you're flying already?" She smiled. "Almost." That afternoon, they drove to the Foundation's new community center, where children and families gathered for the spring event. There were art booths, therapy dogs, live music, and story tents where kids could read aloud or simply listen. Lily walked among them like she belonged there, because she did. She was no longer a visitor to safety. She was its host. At one point, a little boy, maybe 5, approached her and tugged on her sleeve. "You're the girl from the poster," he said, pointing to a banner with her drawing of 2 hands reaching for each other. Lily knelt down. "I am. What's your name?" "Ty," he whispered. "Hi, Ty. You doing okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't used to be, but now, better." She smiled and gave him a high five. "That's the best kind of okay." James watched from across the yard. He saw what few others did. Not just the grace in Lily's kindness, but the strength it took to offer it. She had walked through darkness, and instead of becoming it, she had learned to light a path through it for others. After the event, they sat together on the rooftop garden that overlooked the city. Lily sipped a juice box. James had tea. The lights of Los Angeles sparkled below like scattered diamonds. "You know what today is?" he asked. "Sunday? Also the day I adopted you. 3 years ago." She turned to him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "Changed my life." "You changed mine too," she whispered. Then after a pause, "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" James didn't flinch. They didn't talk about her often, Lily's biological mother, because there were too many unknowns, too many scars. "I think she'd be amazed," he said, "at everything you've become, at how brave you are." Lily looked out over the city. "Do you ever get scared anymore?" "All the time," James said, "but I don't let it stop me. Not when I have you to show me the way." They sat in silence for a while. Then Lily said, "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To fly, like in the drawing." James smiled. "You've been flying for a long time, kiddo. I'm just lucky I got to be the one watching." Back at home, she fell asleep early, curled on the couch with a sketch pad on her chest. James carried her to bed, kissed her forehead, and pulled the covers around her like armor. He stood in the doorway watching her, marveling at the quiet strength in such a small person. He didn't know what the future held. No one did. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Lily's voice would never be silenced again. Not by fear, Not by betrayal, not by anyone, because in a world full of noise, she had found the power of truth. And the man who once thought success was everything had discovered the only legacy that truly mattered. Love, fierce and unwavering. And the little girl who taught him how to live it. In my view, the ending of this story is powerful because it reflects a rare kind of transformation, one rooted not in dramatic gestures, but in quiet, consistent love. It doesn't end with revenge or public vindication, but with healing, growth, and the rebuilding of trust between a father and a daughter. That's what makes it resonate. Lily, though just a child, becomes the moral compass and emotional heart of the story. Her courage isn't loud, but it's unwavering. And James, a man used to control and power, learns that true strength comes from vulnerability, from listening, from putting people first, not profits. The most satisfying part of the ending is its realism within the hope. Not everything is perfectly fixed. Not all wounds vanish. But life becomes better, deeper, and more meaningful. The trauma doesn't define them. What they choose to do with it does. That message, in a world so often driven by appearances, feels not only timely, but timeless.